Good morning, Winterview back with another brief dialogue for his best, most dearest friend, Annastacey. Well, this was recorded yesterday en route from home to work. However, due to its appalling audio quality, it was deleted. Apologies. It was fresh then. Now it's going to sound a bit stale, maybe even rehearsed. Apologies in advance. One caveat. Today's dialogue is paradoxical. It's talking about knowledge and knowing. The caveat is that it will sound like I know something. As with all these brief dialogues, it's important to remember, I don't know anything. I'm experiencing what's happening. Fresh, out of the ethers. I don't know what anything's about. And here we go. Knowledge and knowing. Understanding and knowing. Recognition and knowing. Knowledge are facts. Facts only exist bound in a context. Facts do not exist independently of context. There are no universal facts, ergo no universal truth or truths. There's a very common misperception among people that they can discover universal truths. Truths so profound they transcend space and time because of their truthness. So awesome are these truths thought to be that one glimpse of a truth, a universal truth, would make you blind from the awesomeness. Not true. Not so. Truth, or fact, I should say, is bound in context. The knowing of that truth, or of that knowledge, is something entirely different, a different order of magnitude altogether, unrelated to knowledge. The knowing and the knowledge are apparently the same category, but as I said, are entirely different. Let us start with an example. What does it mean? Knowledge. Knowledge is the acquisition of information, but moreover, structured, codified into categories. Sense is made of the knowledge based on the context in which the knowledge arises. Winterview works in his day-to-day humdrum life as a clinical psychologist. Clients will come in and they will say things like, I'm totally depressed, yo. I'm totally anxious, yo. Etc. They don't really talk like that. It's a generalization, I suppose. The depression that they might report. Now, do I know they're depressed? How do I know it? Well, first and foremost, depression is considered a mental illness, so its context or its classification falls under that broad category for starters. Next, we use criteria, factors, that when they conglomerate in clusters of symptoms, you might say, we might start to suspect depression is a fact. But it's only a fact so far as the pre-existing diagnostic classification is laid down. And then we can talk about knowledge. we might go through a list of symptoms for that person, such as sadness, feeling tearful or crying a lot, feelings of loss and hopelessness, perhaps feelings of guilt or shame about imagined deeds done or actual deeds done, a feeling of low energy, perhaps, can't get out of bed, don't want to get out of bed, disturbed sleep patterns, sleeping lots more than I used to, or hardly any at all, disturbed appetite patterns, not hungry anymore, or eating loads when I didn't used to, attention and concentration difficulties, used to be quite focused, now not so much. What else? Maybe comorbid, that's a fancy way of saying other problems that are going along with the depression. Getting sick a lot, perhaps. Missing lots of responsibilities that I used to be quite good at maintaining in my life. And so on and so forth. If the individual has the list of symptoms as laid out by the diagnostic manual, I could say, I know they're depressed. But that knowledge is only so far as the context of the diagnostic manual would suggest depression. Outside of that manual, those facts are meaningless. They're individual facts, so what? And are they facts? We could even tease them apart, break them down, and perhaps discover they're very fluid, hard to define at a micro level. So we need to be cautious in that respect. But however, that's not important. The next thing is the knowing. I said earlier, the knowing is an entirely different order of magnitude of the knowledge. How is it known? How is any of that known? When the person in the example in psychology sits down, how is it known that they're sitting there? How is it known that we're about to have a conversation, or that we are having a conversation? How is that known? And then when they're listing their symptoms, and the mind is reporting, sounds like depression to me, probably it is depression, better check further on that. How is that known? How is that recognized, you might say? The mind might report something like, oh, the mind knows that. But that's not exactly true. The mind is the one reporting on the facts. The mind is the one formulating, coming up with the story, putting it into a narrative, a structure, giving it structure. The mind doesn't know the mind. A thought could trigger another thought, let's just say, but that's not the same as one thought knowing another thought. Knowledge and knowing, from this perspective, are two entirely different orders of events. Now, let's suppose, with this imaginary client, we've gone through a list of factors that suggest depression. I might have administered a clever psychological measure that measures depression. And it says then, yes, depression seems to be the case, more or less. I could tell that person, Madam or Sir, it is my belief, based on the following evidence, like a lawyer, I suppose, that you have what we call in psychology depression. Now, they understand. They understand that they have something called depression. Is that true? Is it a fact? How is it known? It's true, or the truth of that, once again, to hammer this home, is only bound by the context, or the rules, you might even say, or the framework in which it was set up before the conversation. The framework of what is mental health, What is a mental health problem? What is a mood disorder? What is depression? This is depression, etc. That's the context and the framework to receive that information and to even claim knowledge. Outside of that, those facts they have no meaning. So if there was no statistical clarification, no way of understanding those facts, no diagnostic manual, for example. Can you imagine a world? But no diagnostic manual. Then a person could say, I feel sad, I feel guilty, I feel like crying, I don't have any energy, etc., etc. And what is happening there is just fact, or even reporting on their subjective experience. And the person listening would be, oh, okay, interesting, So there might be another context there, like compassion, for example, and that'd be a context. Or having a conversation with a friend who's telling you stuff could be another context, and so on and so forth. Then the facts take on meaning within the context. But then the greater question is, do I know that? What is known? The knowing of the fact is that radical subjectivity, that subjectiveness that has no way of being described, that awakeness, that someone or something must be awake to that, to know it. The other part of this is the mind loves to collect knowledge. It loves to classify, sort, structure, put into a hierarchy, all sorts of fun and wonderful things. It likes to argue, debate endlessly, even with itself, if no one else will engage in that. And people get into these arguments all the time about, is this true? Is that true? And so forth. And you even hear people say, in arguments you might hear, I know. You see, I know. And the word is misused, I would suggest, quite frequently. To know is something special in a way. Let us use another example. Let us suppose that there was a group of people camping in the woods, maybe 10 people, and they all observed what they believed to be a UFO, an alien craft, land in the woods near where they were camping. Some of them would be curious and amazed, some of them might be full of terror and run, fleeing, etc. And some might just stand there in shock, not quite believing what they're seeing. Later, the UFO takes off and zips out of sight. What just happened in that example? What do the people know? What is a fact? What is truth in that example? First and foremost, you'd probably recognize that most of them would have their own spin, so to speak, their own perspective on what they thought they saw. They might come back from the woods and tell friends and family what happened. I saw a UFO. Fact, so to speak. Another might say, I saw something really weird, but I don't quite know what it is. Fact. Some person might come back and say, saw this weather balloon land in the woods, then take off again. Fact, as far as they're concerned. Who's correct? In the raw knowing of it, you could say that they all were there to know it. Someone telling the story later, secondhand, a family member telling another family member, Timmy was in the woods and saw a UFO. Wow, is that a fact? Yes, I know it's a fact. Well, the second-hand information is different now. What that person knows is the knowing that Timmy told them a story about a UFO. That is the knowing, so to speak. But the knowledge, the facts, are twofold. There is the facts as bound by the story according to Timmy about the UFO, etc. And now there's another thing which is interesting to me. There's the fact that they're telling the story again. That's another fact, you might say. And the context is storytelling. I could go on, but that's another whole brief dialogue. So, getting back to the central point there, the people who were there could claim the knowing of something. They were the ones present and awake, you might say, to the experience. They were the ones knowing. The facts about the experience are bound in context. Is there such a thing as a true fact? This is where it gets very sticky very quickly. A true fact is a fact in that context with specific rules to that context. A very common example of this confusion you'll see in mainstream medicine versus, say, alternative medicine. The individuals who work in alternative medicine might have some amazingly wonderful cures and treatments for medical problems, but they get themselves in a bind when they start to refute the facts of medicine. And vice versa, the people in medicine get themselves into a bind refuting the facts of alternative medicine. For example, in medicine, they use classification systems for disorders and diseases, etc. And they follow rules, and they're very structured in a way. The medical model is quite scientific usually, and it might have a list of criteria for a disease. It might say, when the person has this, and this factor, then we could say they have this disease. That is a medical diagnosis based on the context of medicine, based on a historical cluster of data, and so forth. When the non-medical person comes into that and says, I have knowledge, or I have a treatment, I could say, for that ailment, they need to be very cautious there, because they're now entering the medical model world. And their treatment was born out of a totally different stream of knowledge. It could be, let's say, unblocking energy in the body, let's just say, an ancient Chinese system of unblocking energy. When that system was being developed, or was developed maybe thousands of years ago, they didn't have the modern medical classification of diseases that the modern doctors are using now. So they, in one sense, never treated medical problems, because they didn't classify the problems in the same way they've been classified now. The individuals might report similar symptoms, but that's not the same as the classification of that illness. So when the energy worker now asserts, I have a treatment for diabetes, they need to be cautious there, because diabetes, as it's classified, is classified in a medical framework, and their treatment did not evolve out of a medical framework. Similarly, the doctors and people who work in medicine can make the same error. They can suggest that the treatment in alternative medicine does not work because there's no evidence or so forth. Yet, what does it not work for? Could be the rebuttal. The energy worker who, let's say, unblocks energy in the body could be unblocking energy in the body. That might be a thing that's actually happening in that model, But there's no framework to understand that in medicine. They don't have a classification for energy unblocking yet. So the energy unblocking might in fact have some kind of effect on a person's diabetes. It just might. Who knows? But are they treating the diabetes? No. They are unblocking the energy. So they would be wise not to go around asserting this is a treatment for diabetes. Both of them are relative to their system, relative to their frameworks. Both medicine and alternative medicine in this example have facts relative to the system of knowledge in which they evolved. To overlap the two systems and structures is a pointless endeavor, absolutely pointless. There's no meeting of the two. But how is any of that known? The knowing of it, once again, is an entirely different order of magnitude. The knowing is that awakeness that I, so to speak, am here to know that. The knowing of it does not rely on facts, does not rely on knowledge. You could recognize something within your system of knowledge as being correct or incorrect. But the recognition of that falls in the framework of that knowledge, and again is not the knowing of it. So when someone says, I know that answer is not correct, what they're really saying is there's a recognition of an error within the framework based on the rules of that framework. That is what is recognized. What is known is unnameable, indescribable. You can't say what is known. This all points to something, if you haven't already clocked it, that if everything is relative in terms of knowledge to its structure, then is anything actually true? This goes back to the beginning of the talk, where there is no universal truth. There's no thing or truths that are out there that you will learn and have a better life because of it. The knowing of all of that may suggest by the word that we know something. But when most people say, I know, they're usually actually saying, I recognize the coherence of that statement within a context as valid or invalid, perhaps. Well, I think I've said enough on this topic for now. Thank you for listening. You might detect a small sniffle in my voice. I hope I'm not coming down with blocked energy. This has been Winterview with another brief dialogue. Comments, welcome.